Good morning and welcome to the first meeting of the Citizen Oversight Board for August. We are glad to welcome Chief Thomas to our meeting today as our guest participant. A few announcements from the board. The first is Rufina Hernandez will likely be appointed to the COB in the next week. This will be replacing Nick Weber on the board and filling his position, and just a note of gratitude to Nick. I know we've already done it, but just wanted to thank him for his service to the city by means of this board. There remains one vacancy on the board that the mayor's office is working to fill. They're continuing to look at applications. So if you know someone who's a good fit, please encourage them to apply. Without a quorum, we will be waiting on the meeting minutes from our previous meeting. So we'll go directly into questions and discussion with Chief Thomas. Chief, we sent you some questions in advance. So if you wouldn't mind reading the question out loud and then answering it, would be appreciated.
Okay, well, thank you guys. Good to see you all. So the first question is, could you please tell us more about the trust patrols mentioned by Mayor Johnson during his State of the City speech, and what exactly is new about this program? And I guess really the short answer is nothing is really new. And so this is really just kind of a name in a way to sort of quantify things that we have, I think, historically done. And so we kind of came up with sort of an internal definition of a trust patrol that I'll read here. So trust patrols refers to a proactive approach by police officers where they engage with the community in positive, non-enforcement contexts. The primary goal of these patrols is to build and reinforce trust between law enforcement and the public. Unlike traditional patrols focused on responding to incidents or enforcing laws, trust patrols emphasize positive interaction, community engagement, and relationship building. And so, trust patrols might include things like visiting local businesses or schools, community centers, parks, rec centers, to introduce themselves, offer various types of support. Could also involve attending community meetings or other community events to foster dialogue and collaborate. Could also include, stopping by playgrounds or parks, or just kids gathered in the neighborhood to engage in play basketball, race up and down the street, those kinds of things, play soccer, which has happened a number of times, or provide assistance or information on in a non-enforcement capacity, such as offering safety tips or participating in community outreach. So the intent is to enhance our approachable and relatable police presence, improve public perceptions of law enforcement, and strengthen community bonds. And so, I think it's important to note that this isn't limited to patrol officers. I mean, obviously, supervisors, command officers, our community resource officers who I think do this work, kind of pretty regularly, and even our school resource officers who engage in a very positive way with young people in schools. So I think these are all examples of trust building efforts, and I think what is different now is since trust, building trust in the community is a mayoral priority. Just kind of figuring out a way to quantify that so that we can really just kind of track what we value. Yes.
I just have a follow-up question. So, is there ever a circumstance where the officers are sort of not wearing their uniform, or, not carrying their duty belt, or any like sort of de-arming presence?
Yeah, generally not. I mean, I think that there are instances where, where they may be wearing a softer uniform. That could be like a polo with a DPD badge or some softer form of the uniform. I think that there are occasions. In fact, I can think of a number of occasions where we've actually participated in sporting events where we've worn, basketball jerseys, or played soccer wearing a soccer jersey. So I think in those kinds of contexts, certainly we would be involved in those kinds of things, not wearing a uniform.
Thanks.
Okay, so I think if there's no other questions as it relates to that, I'll go on to number 2, which is during our last meeting, Monitor Castle shared that the OIM and DPD have begun sending separate closure letters to complaints. One of our recommendations from our most recent annual report requested that more information on DPD's closure letters be added. Have you made any progress in updating the content of those closure letters? And so yes, in that, we are sending a more detailed closure letter as it relates to sustained cases. So, obviously the discipline letter goes out, and then the letter that is sent to the complainant is really kind of based off of that information that is contained in that report. We've met several times, myself, the EDOS and the city attorney, as well as internal affairs and CRO have met to really kind of finalize this process. And I think the one final step that I think we need to hammer out, and there is a meeting on the calendar in the near future, is to identify exactly what are we going to include in those closure letters where it's a not sustained finding. Obviously we provide detail in decline letters, but just kind of finding that right balance and that appropriate balance as it relates to providing details in those instances where a case is not sustained. So again, more to come on that. There is a meeting plan where we'll kind of hammer that out, and then I can report back the progress there. Okay, so question 3 is, have any new community members been seated on the DPD Use of Force Board? Has the selection process worked as anticipated? So there has been one individual added to this body recently. They've participated in just 2 use of force reviews thus far. But I would have to say that the process has not worked as anticipated. We reached out to all of the city council folks. We did get some people putting feelers out. And, I think much of the response was asking whether or not there's compensation available for that. And when the reply was no, then I think the interest sort of waned at that point. And so, having just discussed this recently, we are now going to approach each of our community advisory boards. So I have my own community advisory board, as does every district commander. And I think that the folks that typically join us for those engagements, I think would be a good body of folks to engage and see if they would be willing to add to our pool. And so that's kind of next, since we didn't get the response that we had anticipated from the council nominations.
Chief, can you remind us how many new community members are we hoping to see on the
Well, I think that I'm not exactly sure what the sweet spot is, and maybe that's something we can even talk about. But I think the infrequency with which we do these use of force boards, if we were to have say 10 people on the board and rotate them to some on some regular cadence, they would have very few reviews. It would be very few and far between. So I think we need to kind of find a sweet spot where we keep folks engaged, but then kind of allow for fresh faces, and I think we can continue to if we can find a good pool of candidates, or at least a good resource to provide us with new candidates. I think we can always kind of continue to have new blood, for lack of a better term, on that, or in that group.
Okay, so not clear at this point how many you would.
No, I think we'll kind of gauge it initially by the interest that we receive, and if we feel like we've got maybe too many to handle, and it just seems to create some disengagement because people aren't engaged often enough to want to continue to participate, then I think we can, cap it at some point.
I also wonder, based on what you were saying about the fact that there may be a deterrent to serving because there's no compensation attached. And I know there are huge budget constraints, but I wonder if some modest stipend needs to be proposed perhaps in the next city budget to have at least to have at least some incentive to serve on this board. It's important.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I can understand that. I guess the other side of that coin, though, is that I mean we have hundreds of volunteers that that put in thousands of volunteer hours every year without compensation. And so I think that there is an appetite to do things for free, but for whatever reason, I don't know if that seems like more work than, or maybe not, something that is of interest to folks. I'm not exactly sure what the reluctance is, I think, to develop a significant number of people that are interested in doing that, but we're gonna keep at it.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Sure.
I think it's worth mentioning, the COB board members do receive a stipend for our participation. And, for many of us, I would say that is not the reason we participate, but for some of us, it allows for replenishment of wages perhaps lost by attending meetings. And so if we think about, having a broad reach, that might be a reason to compensate.
Sure.
And especially for those use of force, reviews, they can be 30 hours of prep or something, right?
Yeah,
It's a huge
correct.
amount of work. So
Correct.
that would be a reason to think about it.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
So the next question is, since our last meeting, there has been substantial media reporting on the use of drones as first responders and DPD's plans to do so. Do you have an anticipated timeline for when Denver residents might begin seeing DPD drones in the sky? And so I'll say that we actually launched our drone program April 15th of this year, and thus far we've had, I think, around 25 deployments. Anything from searching from crime scenes, doing perimeter searches. There was an active shooter call, a few missing and endangered parties that we have launched the drone. Initially, we were just partnering with Denver Fire for drones that they had. We recently received a donation that allowed us to purchase 5 of our own drones. And so, those drones will be used to further that program. And then I think, so then the next question is, reporting on other police departments, particularly Chula Vista in California, shows that they frequently send drones to a wide variety of calls, including very low level ones. Do you plan to focus DPD's drone program on either high priority calls or low priority calls where ultimately, yes, we want to use the drone program, the drone as a first responder program, to respond to all types of calls. I think we want to build a capacity to be able to do that in all segments of the city, recognizing the value of being able to get to calls very quickly, make an assessment as to whether or not a response is needed at all, or maybe making an assessment of what type of response is needed. Do we need an emergent response? Can it be a non-emergent response? Is it such that only one car needs to come and manage the situation, or multiple cars? And I think that we've seen evidence that getting a drone overhead and making an assessment, I think, can better prepare the officers that ultimately do respond into the type of response that's appropriate for the situation. And so I think that we want to build out a drone program that allows us to use it for both high priority and low priority calls, recognizing that both of those will give us the opportunity to lower response times completely. And so the anticipated timeline for building it out to the degree that we would like to, I think that it's about a year out. I think from now is when we expect to have a fully functioning drone as a first responder program. We're still looking for additional funding to continue to build our infrastructure, also getting some last minute approvals from FAA and things like that. And so I think that we're postured, I think, well. We've met with a number of vendors, and so I think we kind of know the direction that we want to go. And we just need to, I think, diligently kind of move in that direction.
Can I ask a few follow-up questions? I
Yeah.
know we reviewed the policy probably about a year ago at this point, and just wanted to follow up with a few things. And I said it on this call, but I helped another city sort of launch their drone program. And I think there's a lot of value in that tool. The questions I have are first on policy. So, I think it's important to make sure that a drone could never be taken over by a bad actor. And so do you have a policy around like what network and the security of a network that the drone is operating on?
I believe so, but I don't have specifics on that, so I can check into that.
Okay. I remember there being something mentioned, or maybe the absence of a mention in the policy, but it's worth
Sure.
talking about. And then, is there any circumstance where the drone could carry a payload of any kind?
No, that's not. That's we don't find interest in that capability.
And then, so is the idea with the program that each vehicle or something would carry a drone, like sort of talk about like how this would be operational at scale?
So I think best laid plans, what we would like to do is have drones have infrastructure built on all of our police stations and even headquarters, so that the drones can be dispatched from the from the rooftop of these structures, so that they can be more located in the districts with which the calls for service are occurring in. And so obviously for, like our SWAT team and some of our other proactive teams, there may be utility in having them dispatched from, say, a patrol vehicle. But I don't see, precinct officers, having access to a drone. I mean, certainly if there's a need for one, then, they can call for one, and either one of our specialty units can deploy with theirs, or one can be dispatched from, the nearest installation.
Okay. Yeah, one could see that if you have too centralized a dispatch, that you're flying over restricted areas, or you might get into conflicts with other aerial.
Yeah, and those are some of the
equipment.
FAA conversations that we're having.
Yeah. Okay. And then from a sort of policy standpoint, most drones have sort of a camera and they're capturing video, and you sort of, you fly over my backyard and I'm committing some sort of, violation of the law in my backyard, but I'm not actually what you're looking for. So can you talk a little bit about how, we're not creating like surveillance in the city?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. So I believe that this is already included in policy, and this is a question that is asked of every drone manufacturer that we speak with. So we want the sort of the camera on the drone to essentially be fixed in the direction that it's flying, as it's flying to the dispatch location. And then when it's in that dispatch location, being able to to use the camera as appropriate, with pan, tilt, and zoom and all of those kinds of capabilities. And the other thing that we are hoping to build toward is the opportunities, from a transparency standpoint, the opportunity for folks to be able to look on a dashboard and see the flight of the drone, and then be able to see the things that it was able to capture, either accidentally or purposefully.
Okay. So a couple of other things. Are you looking at getting individual officers licensed, or are you looking at it like enterprise level license? Are people using their private licenses? I could be a drone operator in my free time. It could be something fun, but it is a distinct process from like what a corporate entity would need.
No. So we already have, I think, maybe the number is 14 certified drone operators that are sworn DPD personnel. And if we ever went away from sworn DPD personnel, it would be civilian DPD employees. If we ever decided to go that way, maybe deciding that, sworn officers are better deployed in other situations rather than, I think very similar to our real-time crime center. We have folks that are monitoring halo cameras and things like that that are civilians. And so, there might be an opportunity for us to, or need for us to civilianize our drone program and have the operators be civilians, but they would be department members. They wouldn't be contracted or anything like that.
Okay. And then probably my last question on this, have you developed policy and protocol with other city departments who may also have drone programs about sort of the use? Actually, I have two more questions, the use of those. So an example would be there's a fire, that follows a police chase or something, right? And so perhaps the fire department wants to, understand sort of what the layout is, and then your team's there, and then everybody's sort of like flying drones that crash into each other. So what's that look like between departments?
So, we actually developed our drone policy in coordination with DFD. And so there is coordination there. Either, we were using their drones at one point, and obviously there may be situations where there will be dual drone deployments, theirs and ours. And so, yes, there's protocols in place to make sure that we're both following policy and that there's no opportunity for, crashes and things like that.
Okay. And then sort of lastly, the last time I looked at this was a few years ago, but there are a lot of prohibitions about flying drones over large crowds, which is actually a really good use case for a drone, right? There's a big parade or a protest or a baseball game or something. What's the limitation or allowable use in terms of large crowds?
So at this point, I don't think any limitation. Obviously, we're coordinating with the city attorney's office to make sure that that everything that we would like to do with the drone, all those safety measures that we would want to take for some sort of large gathering or a demonstration, that we would be able to use the drone effectively. And so, yeah, there's constant communication with the city attorney's office.
Okay. Thanks. Other questions from the board on this? Okay, last question I had, sorry. In pursuit of a fleeing suspect, is there a circumstance where you would chase them with a drone?
So probably not. So I think that what we would be more inclined to use the drone for is when the suspect sort of goes to ground, as we call it, where they have separated from us and they attempt to hide. We would use the drone in order to identify their location from an aerial perspective, but we wouldn't. I think that as we continue to build out our drone program, we'll need to make sure that there's coordination between our drone program policy and our pursuit policy. But if as I think about it, if a pursuit is not authorized in a vehicle or by the helicopter, a pursuit would not be authorized by a drone either.
Thanks.
Okay, so I'll go on to question 5. In March, there was a great deal of concern around frequent crime and calls for service at 2 of the city's hotel shelters on North Quebec Street. These are the House 1000 locations that folks were placed in at the beginning of the year. City took some steps to address that, including increasing DPD's presence, have crime reports and calls for service decreased in the past few months, and where do we stand as it relates to that situation today? So happy to report that crime is significantly reduced there. Violent crime, I think, is almost completely reduced there. We do get some calls for service, although it's very small, and mostly they are medical related or welfare check related, and just to kind of talk about what was done differently. So obviously, um, there was much greater, I think, city involvement in the security plan there. And so General Services, I believe, hired Securitas to have constant on-site security. There were metal detectors that were placed. There were cameras that were placed throughout the facility that have actually been useful in, helping us solve crimes, when violent crime was actually occurring there. They did a sweep for weapons. That we supported, recovered a number of makeshift weapons and some other weapons, guns, knives, and things like that we recovered when we did that several months ago. They now have sort of an amnesty box. So, before you go through the metal detector, there's an opportunity for you to, put in the amnesty box, the knife or the drug paraphernalia or whatever that you can't bring in this box. And I think on some regular rotation, we go by and recover those items out of that box. And then we do have a 4-hour off-duty a shift where 2 officers go back and forth between the 2 hotels. And we determine that 4-hour daily shift based upon sort of call volume in the area and call load and during that specific time frame to kind of identify specifically where we should have that 4-hour block. But again, I think all of those measures have proven to be effective because crime is significantly reduced and even calls for service is very minimal there.
Just a quick
Okay.
question on the box of drugs idea. I don't know what else to call it. I happened to be in Vegas a couple of weeks ago and noticed that next to the recycling and the trash, there's a box where you can place controlled substances at the airport. Do we have something like that in Denver?
I don't believe so. I don't believe so.
Okay. Anyway, thanks.
Sure.
We obviously don't give that stuff back, right?
No. That's why we have an officer come and pick it up and put it in property,
Including weapons, right?
Correct.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. So question 6. On Monday, City Council approved a $75,000 settlement related to use of force by 2 officers against a Mr. Aaron Hernandez. The incident occurred in 2019 and the lawsuit was filed in 2021. It does not appear that an internal investigation was opened as a result of these allegations. Do you think that the plaintiff's allegations, which include that the officers made false, misleading statements, warrants a disciplinary investigation? Specifically for that, no, because that incident actually was reviewed. I mean, that was a use of force incident. So the use of force incident was reviewed by Internal Affairs. It was determined that there was no policy violations. The involved party never did come forward and make any kind of an allegation. And then through the city attorney's review of the incident, there was nothing. There was the only really kind of new, I guess, information were the allegations of false or misleading statements, but we interpret that to be strategic on the part of Mr. Hernandez, who had been charged with assaulting a police officer. And so in this particular case, we did not feel it was appropriate to reinvestigate that case. And then sort of part B to that is, in the future, when you are made aware of lawsuits related to the conduct of DPD officers, will you commit to forwarding them to Internal Affairs for review? I think that's kind of a nuanced response, where it depends. Like if it relates to something that has already been investigated, whether it's a use of force incident or some other kind of complaint and it's already been investigated, the fact that they turn around and file a lawsuit I don't think it would be appropriate to open or reopen an investigation just based on the claims that they made. Certainly, if there was no investigation because it wasn't a use of force report, it wasn't something that was ever brought to our attention, and then we learn of these allegations through a lawsuit, there's already a process in place by which we would forward that to internal affairs to see if there is a need to investigate those claims. And then part C to that question is 9 News reported that Mr. Hernandez's lawyer in 2021 said that the involved officers received commendations for their actions. Can you describe the commendation process and who makes that final decision? So first I have to say that that's actually kind of a misleading and inaccurate statement by the attorney. Those officers did not receive commendations for that incident. I think what he's referring to is in the use of force report that the supervisor completed, the supervisor noted their professionalism, noted their restraint, noted their attempts to de-escalate, noted the calm with which they engaged with those 2 individuals just in the body of the use of force report. So I think it's a stretch to call that a commendation. But just since the door is open, our commendation process, whenever a supervisor identifies that an officer has engaged in some commendatory act or maybe series of acts, they through written submission through the chain of command to the commendations board, make a commendation for whatever they feel is appropriate, that appropriately represents those actions. There's a commendations board that is seated that is made up of department members. They vote on that commendation, determine which commendatory award is most suitable for that, and there's an appeal process if they decide that the act is not commendation worthy, or if the submitter believes that it should be considered for some higher award. There is a appeal process, and then ultimately those commendations come to me for my final approval.
Keith, I've got a general question about this subject, not about the Hernandez matter in particular.
Sure.
It's come up in a prior meeting, and we raised this with Executive Director Saldate because there had been some reporting in the news. I may have it wrong. I think it was either the sheriff in Douglas County or the chief in Douglas County, or sheriff probably down there, but had said that he didn't see any impediment to proceeding on a parallel path with any internal misconduct investigation, while, say, a criminal investigation of that same conduct was moving forward. Obviously, that can be problematic from a Fifth Amendment perspective, Garrity, those sorts of things.
Yeah.
But I'm just wondering, and I realize this is could be more of a legal question, but do you have a view, since he spoke out about that, I'm just wondering if you have a view on that and feel like you could, to the extent possible, without impinging on anyone's rights, move forward with certain aspects of a misconduct investigation against an officer while a criminal investigation is moving forward. Do you have a view on that?
Yeah, I mean, typically, as you know, it's our preference to kind of wait until the criminal matter has been resolved to move forward with any kind of civil or administrative proceeding, and I feel like that's the cleanest. And I think certainly there could be within a series of officers' actions, there could be some criminal components and some administrative components that you could kind of parcel out and maybe address some of the administrative components and kind of leave the criminal components alone, so that you don't cloud the criminal investigation or prosecution of that particular incident. Like while I might agree in principle that it can be done, that they can be done in parallel, I think that in practice, our experience has been is probably best and cleanest, and I would imagine that city attorneys, district attorneys would concur that it's probably cleanest to allow one to proceed before you proceed on the other.
Yeah, and I think I would agree with that in terms of being the cleanest. I think the concern arises from the fact that sometimes criminal investigations can take quite a while.
Yes.
And then
Yes.
the administrative proceedings can then become stale as well while that happens. And you don't want to lose that momentum if, particularly if
Yeah.
there's significant or serious allegations that are
Yeah.
being made. I think
Yeah.
that's where this comes
Yeah.
into play.
Yeah, and I guess that maybe the two things that I would say there is that too, if the conduct is egregious enough, um, I, I don't think in some cases I would be precluded in maybe even terminating somebody before the criminal proceeding has concluded. And in most of these instances, because there is a criminal component, they're not engaging with the public anyway. If it's a felony, I mean, they're sitting at home. If it's some lower level crime, then they're not having public contact anyway. And so while there's been no penalty assessed, and that may take some time. I think at least we are addressing the fact that there may be a concern about this officer's ability to engage appropriately with the community, and so so we prevent that opportunity.
Mm-hmm. Take them off the street.
Yeah.
I mean, it's worth mentioning too that the person sitting at home is being paid by taxpayers, so it's not a zero-sum game.
Well, if it's a felony, I think they're suspended without pay. And certainly, if they were, there would be an opportunity for back pay if they were to be acquitted. But if it's a felony, they're suspended without pay. But duly noted that if they are sitting at home or sitting in an office, secluded from the public, because it's a lower level crime, that yes, they are still getting paid.
Yeah, and I am talking to clarify. I'm talking about a situation where the person hasn't been charged yet, where the criminal investigation takes a long time,
Yeah.
and therefore, yeah, they are taken off the street with pay because he hasn't been charged with anything.
Yeah. Well, if there, in those situations where there is a potential, because we try to run every allegation by the DA and the city attorney pretty quickly. To kind of get their take on it. And if they are like, yeah, there's a potential here that I could accept criminal charges, then I think that informs how we treat that particular officer, whether we, send them home or put them in some other non-line capacity.
Yeah. And of course, you got a new DA who's going to be taking the reins pretty soon. So it'll be interesting to see what his position is on this.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks, Chief.
And so then the final question, relates to Officer Victor Moses, or former Officer Victor Moses, and the dynamic action drill. And I know a number of questions and concerns around this, but because it's a open litigation, there's really not a whole lot that I can say. I can say that yes, we have looked at it. Yes, Post has looked at it. I'm actually looking forward to an opportunity to talk about it and provide some clarity and some context as to what occurred. But unfortunately, I can't do that today. Karen.
Chief, would you be able to talk about personal experience with this particular drill?
They didn't have this particular drill 35 years ago when I was in the academy. They had something very similar. I think without talking specifically about this drill, I believe that there is practicality for all of the drills in the academy, whether they be physical drills or I just think that there's certainly utility for every drill. And while I think our training has evolved, over the last, several years, I think that there's always been utility and post support for all of the drills and instruction that's provided at the academy.
Can you speak specifically of this particular dynamic action drill?
Excuse me?
Can you speak specifically as to the goal for this?
Well, the goal is to make sure that that officers can make appropriate decisions in a dynamic, evolving situation.
And so, how many times does a recruit go through this particular drill to ensure that?
I couldn't answer that. I'd have to ask. I'd have to get an academy person to respond to that.
And in using this particular drill, do you anticipate physical injury to recruits?
Do we anticipate injury? No.
And so, when they occur, is that something out of the norm, or does that happen regularly?
It's not a regular occurrence that people are injured in any situation in the academy.
And so when an injury occurs, is there a review of this particular drill in terms of maybe alleviating the occurrence of broken noses and injuries such as that?
I would say that with any training, there's a review of the training before it's administered, and there I think is a constant review of the training, as it progresses, and then certainly if there are injuries or I would even compare it to testing. If you have a testing mechanism and you're recording a lot of failures, I think that prompts an opportunity to look at the testing. And so I think there's constant review of tests and drills based on outcomes.
The latest complaint lodged about this particular drill occurred in 2021. Are you aware of any changes that were made as a result of that complaint?
I think that there has been constant review in coordination with Post on making sure that all of our training is Post compliant and appropriate for today's instruction.
Is that drill still in place today, Chief?
Some component of it. I mean, there are certain dynamic activities that are required by Post.
So is it still got the 4 stations that are used?
I couldn't speak specifically to that, and I probably should stay away from questions specific to the drill itself because that's, I think, part of the litigation.
But you are aware that there are 4 stations associated with this particular drill?
Yeah, I'm aware of sort of a progression of events that officers are going through that I think kind of mimics things that they may encounter when they're patrolling.
How is assessment made of whether or not the recruit has passed or failed this particular drill?
I don't know that there is a. I think that the drill is set up for success. So we're not. This is not a drill. I don't think there's any drill in the academy that is set up to promote failure.
So if a person ends up with a broken nose, how does that affect the assessment of whether or not they were successful?
Well, I mean, I, I, I don't know how, I mean, certainly if you received a broken nose during a drill, I don't think that would constitute a failure. Just like if you were to affect an arrest of an individual on the street and receive an injury, I think the fact that you were able to safely and successfully take them into custody would be the appropriate outcome.
Thank you, Chief.
Sure.
I think that's the last question we sent in advance. Is that correct?
It was.
Okay. Do board members have additional questions for the chief? All right, seeing none, Chief, I'll thank you for your time today and appreciate the discussion. Look
You're
forward
welcome. Thank
to
you.
hearing the outcomes of many of the items we talked about today. So
Sure. Thank you.
appreciate it. Yep.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Okay, moving back to a few items of board business as now we have a quorum. The first thing is I will ask for approval of the minutes for the July 19th meeting. If folks have had a chance.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, great. All in favor, aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, the motion passes. Thank you. A few other matters of board business. The NACOL conference is in October this year, and currently myself, Alfredo, our new member Rufina, and Daniel plan to attend. Please let Daniel know if you had interest in attending and aren't on that list. Go ahead, Daniel.
Yes, David and Tamisha also expressed interest. The registration is transferable, and so the board members that are on that list are people who have not yet attended. So I went ahead and purchased registrations for them. So it's up to the board, how many people we want to send in a given year, and if we want to book those all right up front, or hold some space. Obviously, taking time off planning can be complicated, and just wanted to make that clarification that we have two more board members who have expressed interest that are not on that list.
Yeah, I mean, my feeling is if board members want to attend, that's great. Let's have them attend. I don't know if there's disagreement on that item. Okay. It's not a particularly expensive location or conference to attend, and I think we've got budget for it. So if you'd like to go, Daniel, if you wouldn't mind following up with those board members. Okay, great. Daniel sent out some information about a request for proposals and a process surrounding that related to our next round of strategic planning. Please review that and provide feedback. It's similar to the approach that we took the last time. So if you were engaged in that, that's great. Otherwise, we used a small selection committee to review responses to RFPs that we sent out pretty informally, to an RFP that we sent out informally. To that end, if you've got folks in your network who do strategic planning on a very small scale for not very much money, let us know, and that's really helpful. And so we'll use that committee to select the firm, and then whoever is selected will then proceed with the board to structure a process for planning. We were looking at doing that in the beginning of December per the board's guidance. So thoughts on that, please send those Daniel's way and my way as well.
Julia, did
Yep.
the person who assisted us last time, is that person up for this again, or are we looking for somebody new?
I think we could certainly reach out there and get a proposal again.
I thought she was pretty good.
Yeah, I thought we had a good outcome, and our plan was certainly workable, right? We executed on most of it, so I think that's great. And if we just wanted to say, let's go, I think we're above a threshold where we would need bids. Is that right, Daniel? We can't just select.
We can,
Okay.
as long as we keep it under $10,000. The the process is much more informal.
Okay. So, that's an option too. And if folks want to opine on that, just, let's do it over email. Okay. We are, currently in the 20th year of the ordinance, creating the city's oversight structure. And so we're looking to do a celebration event. We're still waiting to hear back from the monitor's office, on their, preferred approach. The ordinance passed in a different year than the office began working. And so there are some questions between our two organizations about what is the actual anniversary, which is probably up for interpretation. So, more to come on that, but just letting the board members know, sort of the current, conversation, and the monitor's office may want to celebrate in a next year. So that's that. And then lastly, wanted to kind of talk with the team about the next steps in the discussion of settlements. So as a refresher, we got access to all of the city's settlements related to public safety for the past 7 years. Is that right, Daniel? Just refreshing my.
Yes.
And have looked through them. A big number of those are like police officers crashing their cars accidentally into people, or other sort of less structural issues, I might say. And there are really sort of less than 10 cases where there have been sort of non-monetary requirements coming out of the settlement. Many of those we identified on our own in the initial scope of research that we did. What we're doing as a next step is following up with City Council to say, you know, this isn't a problem in every settlement, but when it occurs, you know, as we initially proposed, there is no real structure for oversight, and there is no transparency into these sort of larger settlements with these non-monetary elements. So the problem we identified at the beginning is the problem. And I think what we see is that it's not this sort of like pervasive issue with every lawsuit that the city settles. And that we still need oversight and transparency into that process. So we'll be drafting a letter to that effect, and we'll be coordinating with City Council, proposing some next steps. So
Julia, a couple things.
Yeah.
Number one, maybe sort of the two components of that. Yeah, I agree. It's great that it's not pervasive, because I think that was our concern. And is there, Daniel, I know you were, and sounds like you've compiled sort of a summary of less than 10 that had non-monetary provisions in them. Are we able to determine, I mean, can we get a list of those and then determine whether in fact they've been complied with, even though their compliance or lack thereof hasn't been disclosed? Number one. And then number two, I thought the city had made some strides in response, frankly, to what we did. You responded to that email, Julia, which is they said the first a non-monetary provision of a particular settlement had been entered into, I think, in the last month or two, and it was posted, which is exactly what should happen. And I think you followed up on that. So to that extent, you know, we've made progress.
I think we have. I think awareness of this issue is the first challenge to overcome, and then the second is, you know, building and codifying a process that should happen, right? That it's not personality driven, like we've put pressure and so then the Department of Safety is responding, right? We want it to be every time, you know, per policy, this is how.
I see. Okay, agreed. As opposed to that just being that one response on the first settlement in 2024 that had a non-monetary provision, they posted it. Thank you very much. That ought to be a pattern in practice.
Right, exactly. Okay. And how do we know that they're doing that with everyone, right?
I got it. Okay.
And what I will say is, while there are not very many examples of non-monetary settlements, the condition applies that when there are non-monetary settlements, there is no oversight and also no sort of codification that the city has done the work. And so that is pervasive when it exists. the same problem occurs. And so I think that, you know, I don't want to diminish sort of like the risk here. Also, often the non-monetary settlements are in these cases where somebody dies, or, you know, there's great harm caused. So, you know, it's just worth mentioning. Go ahead, Daniel.
Understood.
Yeah.
And to your other point, Stefan, about going back and looking at the term, the several that we did find that do exist in the past 7 years. Some of those are easy to verify when the non-monetary term is a policy change. You know, that's very easy. We can go back, we can look at the policy, we can see it, verify it's changed. You know, certain practice changes, you know, make a training video, use it, would be relatively easy to verify with a, you know, a request, please give us the video and, you know, the number of times it's been, you know, used. There are a couple of other terms where it's more personal with the you know, the complainant, the plaintiff of,
Yeah.
you will help this family with this thing. And it's like, well, that's not really it's difficult to
Policy.
verify. We could go to the, you know, the plaintiff's lawyers, and ask them, going back, you know, 7 years at this point, if they have that. But it wouldn't be a, you know, traditional sort of public verification process. It would be, you know, just their attorney saying, we're satisfied.
Yeah.
Yeah, that I understand. That'd be very individualized, and presumably, although not always, I mean, if that term had not been satisfied by the city, the individual could bring a claim for breach of the settlement agreement. I guess we would learn about that.
Yeah.
So to that extent, there is some
Recourse.
you know, enforceability kind of built into the system. Look, if I, for example, if any of us were representing that particular individual, you'd want the city to comply with the settlement. If they didn't, you'd have process available to, you know, to try to bring that forward. So I'm not as concerned with those situations. I'm more concerned with the broader, you know, with the broader terms that would apply across the board and would relate to future incidents and preventing future incidents.
Yeah, I think that's right. So, so as a next step, Daniel, might you just pull, I think you had it, it's just my brain feels foggy on this Friday morning. Just the settlements with non-monetary terms and what those terms are, and then send that document around, to the board, so the board could look at that. And then, as part of our process, I do think we should confirm that each of the terms have been complied with, and get evidence of that from the city. I think that's a useful exercise.
And thank you, by the way, Daniel, for being so dogged on that stuff. So thank you.
Yeah, and it turns out people be crashing their cars a lot. Daniel, anything else you want to say on that?
The largest proportion of those, so it was about 154 or 155 settlements from the start of 2017 through, I think, Q1 of this year. And the largest proportion of those were George Floyd protest related.
Okay.
And none of those cases had extra terms, I think, because there were a lot of policy changes that did occur. As a result of that, there was a lot of scrutiny already. And so that large proportion really were purely financial, and usually related to various injuries. The second largest would be the, you know, vehicle accidents, where there may have been injury, there may have been property damage to someone else's vehicle, to, you know, medical bills, that kind of thing. And then the third, you know, the smaller category would be, you know, use of force and sort of specific instances of alleged misconduct.
All that makes sense. And and OIM issued that very well-known report, obviously, with recommendations that, so I'm sure that's sort of superseded everything.
Okay, great. Any other questions on that from the board? Okay, and thanks to all who have participated in the process. I know we're, you know, approaching a year's worth of effort on this, and yeah, just took a long time to get the access to the suits. Okay, I think that is all we had for board business. Monitor Castle, I see that you are on video. Do you have anything that you would like to discuss with the board in the public meeting?
In executive session, yes.
Okay.
Oh, not in public meeting, no.
Not in the public meeting. All right. With that, in light of the fact that we may review matters of ongoing investigation, may I have a motion to move to executive session?
So moved.
Second.
Great. All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Great. See you all there. With that, oh, go ahead, Daniel.
Just noting, since Nick Weber was not here at the beginning, this would probably be his final moment in open session, if we wanted to say a farewell.
Farewell.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. It's been great. Sorry to leave.
We'll miss you.
We will miss you.
Yeah.
We'll still connect with you though.
I mean, I plan on attending the public meetings. I just won't have all the fun of being able to hang out with everybody. But it's been really wonderful.
You can chat all your comments into
Yeah, I'll send my questions. Ask
Yeah.
Karen, ask them.
Appreciate it. All right. We'll see everyone in executive session.